So let's add the functionality for the cancel and join the activity. And what we'll do, we'll just go to our activity store. And this is getting pretty big now, but what we'll do, we'll just add another two actions. We'll add an action to attend activity that takes no parameters. And what we want to do here, we want to create an attendee object that we can push into our activity attendees array. And let's just do this outside of our activity store because this is already quite big, this particular file. And inside our util.ts, I'm just going to create a const, and I'll need to export this const. So I'll say export const and create attendee, and we'll pass in a user of type iUser, and we'll return an iAttendee from this. And what we'll do in here is we'll just return basically an attendee object. So we want the display name, and we'll set this to the user.displayname. The isHost we'll set to false because it's just going to be a normal attendee. The username we'll set to user.username, and then the image we'll set to user.image. And we'll need to add the exclamation mark there because this could potentially be null. And back in our activity store, what we'll do is we'll say const attendee equals create attendee, and what we'll do is we'll pass in our user from the user store. So we'll say list.rootstore.userstore.user, and once again we'll need to add the exclamation mark because there's no way our users should be able to get to this without being logged in. So we should have a user inside there, even though TypeScript is not aware of that particular fact. And what we want to do is set the properties for the activity that we've currently selected. Now, because we are using this function from within inside our activity details page, then we will have something inside our activity that we have inside our activity store. And once again, this has the potential to be null, but we know it's not going to be null. So what we'll need to do, just to stop TypeScript complaining, is we'll need to wrap this in an if statement, or we can wrap it in an if statement. We can use exclamation marks as well, but I'm just going to say if this activity, then what we'll do is we'll say list.activity.attendees.push, and we'll pass in our new attendee, and we'll also set the isGoing property. So we'll say list.activity_isGoing equals to true. And what we'll also do is update the activity in the activity registry as well. So everything's consistent, and we'll say list.activityregistry.set, and we'll say list.activity.id and list.activity. And we're just doing this locally for now. We'll add the functionality to hook it up to the API very shortly, but for now we'll just make sure we can get this working locally. And we'll also add one for cancelling attendance. So we'll say cancel attendance equals, and takes no parameters. And once again we'll check to make sure we've got something in list.activity. And we'll say list.activity.attendees equals, and we'll just use the filter array function to remove the user from the attendees. And what we can do is say list.activity.attendees.filter, and then we'll add the filter expression, and we'll say a.username is not equal to list.rootstore.userstore.user.username, and we'll need to add the exclamation mark here as well, and just reformat this to make it a bit cleaner. So this is going to return a new array, which is going to contain all of the attendees apart from the currently logged in user. And then we'll say list.activity.isGoing, and we'll set this equal to false. And once again, we'll just update our activity registry so that we have consistency, and say list.activityregistry.set and list.activity.id and list.activity. So pretty straightforward functions. We're really just updating our observables in our store at the moment so that we can test the functionality locally, and then what we'll do is we'll hook this up to the API. So with these two functions in place, what we can do is we can go back to our activity detail header, and we can make a decision about what we want to do here. Do we want to pass in our methods from the activity store via our activity details page, or what we can do is just use our store directly inside our activity detailed header, and that's what we'll do in this case. So I'm going to add const root store, and we'll say use context and pass in the root store context, and then we'll say, or we'll destructure the props. So we'll say root store dot activity store, and what we need to bring in here is attend activity and cancel attendance. And then what we can do is just add these functions to our onClick event. So we'll say onClick equals cancel attendance for the cancel button, and we'll do the same for the join button and say attend activity, and we should be able to see this working. So let's head back over to our browser, and if I click on cancel attendance, Tom disappears from the list, which is good. And if I click on join activity, Tom doesn't appear in the list. And it's very easy to forget to do this, but in our activity detail sidebar, we need to make it an observer, otherwise it's not going to be able to observe the changes of the observable. And our attendees are in our activity detailed sidebar, and we just need to make this an observer as well. So let's use the observer higher order component we get from MobX React Lite, and just wrap that around our activity detail sidebar. And if we go back and take a look, and if I click on cancel attendance, Tom disappears, and if I join the activity, he reappears. And that works fine. And what we'll do next is hook this up to the API.